All right, with so much going on with the Philadelphia 76ers through their 22 games, felt like maybe we take a look around the NBA, see what's going on as the Sixers try to pick up all of their pieces, get back on the right track, pick up some W's, and maybe that'll have a little impact on what's going on around the NBA as to how they might push themselves up in the standings just a little bit in the Eastern Conference. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers podcast on a Tuesday, presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app and use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365 with Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck. I'm Devon Gibbons. Bree is here. All of you on a Tuesday hanging out with us as we get ready to go around the NBA. A story dropped on Monday with a bunch of news about players that we get to that December mark, Derek, and all the names that pop up that may be eligible for a trade, including the Sixers players as well, based on offseason moves, acquisitions, signings of contracts, and players that might be available soon as December starts to hit. And you look at, all right, where's this team now in the NBA? What's going on with this particular group, and how might their season change based on their record, like the Sixers? But as Kyle pointed out yesterday, for their last five, so maybe they're trending in the right direction. God bless you. And some of the other teams,
sick of these losses.
Exactly. You don't have to worry about those. They've won a lot lately.
They haven't been losing. We're on the mend here.
They've been winning a lot lately. You don't have to worry about those. But for some of those other teams, they might be in that place, or maybe their situation might be different where they have to move on from some players anyway. And some names were real big around the NBA. Derek, yesterday we heard about Jimmy Butler, maybe Herb Jones, Cam Johnson, just names that we've talked about in the offseason as we are now 20-plus games into the regular season for the Sixers. So while we will talk about the Sixers and where it's important there, we just want to check around the league, too, to see where, while we're all up in arms about what's going on around this basketball team, what's going on with the rest of the basketball teams, like Kyle's favorite team, the Denver Nuggets? What's going on out there? What's happening with that group?
Just to be clear, I don't have a lot of issues with the Denver Nuggets. It's more of the jokers who come in here and try to cause
What's
trouble.
happening with
the
Minnesota?
jokers? Was that intentional?
What's happening with the Minnesota Timberwolves? I don't know, but we have a bunch to talk about, man. And what really jumped out at you with some of these names? Were you surprised about the Jimmy Butler part? Not really.
Well, it's the Derek Bodner victory tour for his bold prediction that Jimmy's going to get traded this year. It's
I did make that. Yeah. I completely forgot about. I appreciate you.
I don't just take victory laps for myself. I will pat you on the back when I think you got something. Now he has to actually get traded, right? Nobody gets a victory lap for.
He's ramping up to be traded,
like ramping up, but yeah, the
Heat are games.
The Heat are looking at options. So,
I think the headliner of that report was that the Heat were listening to offers for Jimmy Butler. I certainly think that there is a chance that comes to fruition. Like, clearly there was some hesitancy to give him a longer-term contract. We saw that over the summer. He has a player option for next year at like $52 million or so, which at 35 next year, he will turn 36. That is a big dollar one. I'm not sure there are going to be a ton of teams looking to give him that next contract, including the Miami Heat. And when they decided that they weren't going to pursue an extension last summer, this was always a possibility. I will say the Heat are actually probably playing a little bit better than I was maybe expecting, or at least close to what you were expecting in terms of the wins and losses. They are currently the 5th seed in the East at 12-10. Part of that is that the Eastern Conference is very meh, but part of it is that they continue.
And even that's being generous, honestly.
I'm trying to be nice here. I don't think it's necessarily a stunner. And it's certainly not something that you expect the Sixers to get involved with, in part because matching that salary, the only real way to do that would be to trade Paul George when he is available to be traded. As a reminder, you cannot trade Joel Embiid at all this year, so I just want to nip any of that conversation in the bud. So yeah, this isn't necessarily news that will impact the Sixers, but it is news that if it happens, obviously he is a big name. Obviously, there would be a lot of moving parts in that trade. You could maybe get in there as a 3rd or 4th team in that deal. That would be the impact towards the Sixers, though, not him as a player.
Yeah, so the knock-on effect if Butler gets traded, if we assume that probably turns into younger players, or I don't know what the aim in Miami would be, because I've assumed that as long as Pat Riley's alive and kicking, they're just going to try to go for it as much as possible until he's kind of done with the NBA, we would say. So I don't know what that would look like, but let's say they make a deal, or they're talking with Golden State is going to be in the mix in these type of talks, right? They get mentioned quite often. Maybe Houston is a team that's in the mix, right? They're a young team that's been known to covet more of a ready-made veteran star, right? What these teams have to offer generally are young players, picks, things like that, to try to add Jimmy Butler to what their core already is. So what the Sixers would gain if Jimmy gets moved, more than likely anyway, is a less threatening in the immediate term Miami team. Now, whether that means they just go completely off the rails or it's just a team that if you saw them in the playoffs, there's no boogeyman there, right? There's no, we got to deal with playoff Jimmy. That would be a positive outcome. But it would also, let's call it the short to medium term, you'd put the Heat in flux a little bit, right? They might have a season and a half, couple years potentially of being in the wilderness like they were with the Tyler Johnsons, the Hassan Whitesides, as they load up for their next big opportunity in free agency, as we saw when they went and got Jimmy Butler in the first place, kind of stealing him after Philadelphia opted against bringing him back here. So, yeah, it's still connected to the Sixers, but I just don't know. I feel like if you were going to move Jimmy, you might as well have moved him in the offseason, right? I don't think we've really seen anything different from Butler, anything unexpected, right? He's pretty much the same guy, same player profile, similar shot profile as was in the offseason. He still wants his money. The Heat still don't want to give it to him. It's like, I don't know. Maybe you should have just resolved it when everyone could have seen this coming in the offseason. Certainly Derek Bodner could see it coming in the offseason based on his...
I completely forgot about that prediction.
An elephant never forgets. I remembered quite clearly. So, yeah, it also is going to show, and this came up I was listening to our friends, Brian Windhorst, Tim McMahon, Tim Bontemps on the Hoop Collective. They were talking about a potential frozen market this year, close to frozen market in trades because of all these new CBA rules, right? And the one that they spent a lot of time highlighting is you being, I believe it's first apron hard capped if you take back more than a single dollar over the outgoing salary in a trade, which that is going to that makes especially the big money trades, that makes every trade so much more difficult than it would be otherwise.
Yeah, and it just makes teams hesitant to make trades because they don't want to hard cap themselves until they know for sure that they're not going to need that room. So you're probably going to see more trades right at the deadline rather than like last year where you're getting them months in advance.
And that's the interesting piece about the Jimmy Butler thing as it pertains to the Sixers is the fact that what does that team then look like? Are they already in the place where, as you already mentioned, 12-10 right now in a underperforming Eastern Conference, if you will, for what's going on? But they've played 19 games with Jimmy Butler of their 22, and they've also had a run with him from his time in Miami, at least dating back to last year and right now where he's missed 3 games, where they know how to play without him. So if you go out there and you do add some other pieces, do they feel like, wow, he is a great player in today's NBA, an all-star, all-NBA level player? Is he one, though, that they could benefit from? All right, let's just move on. This is the Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and whatever else they get back to Terry Rozier in that particular trade where they feel like they are much better in that spot. Not that you lose a great player and you feel like, we can just do it without him, but if he wants out, they want to give him what he wants and he wants to move on, that they can just go out there and play the brand that they really want to play, which we do see a lot when he's not on the floor, where it's a little more free-flowing of how they run. They get out on open floor. And Jimmy Butler can play a lot of different ways, but in this case, that does impact the Sixers. Is it going to be where you catch them on a arrow pointing down kind of thing, as Kyle mentioned, or are they buoyed a little bit because they have this new look basketball team where they feel like they can do things a little differently, and how that might play out for the second half of the season and then going into the playoffs? So that would really be interesting, because I would wonder what might that look like? Who would they be getting back in a Houston deal or a potential Golden State deal that the pieces might fit a little bit better around what Bam Adebayo does out there on the floor? The same thing for Tyler Hero as well, and how that might be a matchup problem for not just the Sixers, but for some of the Eastern Conference teams overall when it comes to the postseason. So that is definitely one. And look, he's the star player, so he's going to drive the conversation no matter what. But he is still a very good player, and he could flip certain things in the Western Conference with those two teams or whatever team he may or may not be traded to because of how talented he is. So that part is always fun to just see it. And as far as the Sixers go, yeah, I mean, the Paul George, Jimmy Butler thing, this was a fun conversation when they were both 27. Now they're 34.
34 and 35.
That conversation is now moved on, especially with you guys always talking about the shooting. And the shooting is different. The shooting is what the shooting is. We know what Paul George shoots. We know what it looks like. We also know what it looks like when Jimmy Butler's out there on the floor. No matter how close Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler are, the shooting is a big factor there. And they are 7 years older from the conversation way back when. So this one is going to be fun to watch it all play out, see if it happens at all, see where the Miami Heat go. But for the Sixers and what that might look like, they're making a move this big. How much of it impacts the Eastern Conference and a matchup in general with the Sixers, because the Sixers still match up with them really well right now. And seeing a new look team coming with more maybe up and down pace, that would be something to see how the Sixers match up with them. If Embiid is healthy, having Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, all of them, it'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ifs in that last part of your statement there that, like, worrying about the playoffs right now feels very much putting the cart before the horse.
Hey, man. 4 of the last 5.
That's true.
Here's how I would tie it back to the Sixers. I think what you're seeing here, and also in the Brandon Ingram situation, you have two guys in Butler and Ingram that, at least I like Jimmy Butler a good bit more than Ingram if you take the age part out of it, right? Just in terms of playoff viability and whatnot. But what you're seeing with those guys is a lot of what we're going to see moving forward, right? These guys are valuable NBA players on expiring deals that teams are, even right now, don't necessarily have the contracts to put together to cobble together a trade, or in some cases it's literally illegal for them to try to use multiple contracts to put these guys into trade. I would say the same thing about Zach LaVine in Chicago, right? Zach LaVine individually has played pretty damn well this year. He's gotten off to a good start. The Bulls have been a little better than I think people have expected, in part because of that, because he's actually been available, quite frankly. And teams are still looking at him and saying, either one, we don't really want him, or two, it's not really viable for us to trade for him in season. And as we get further into this new CBA, right, the guys that are on these big money contracts are going to get harder and harder to trade for, not because there's an absence of stars around the league, but because those, let's say 20 million, 25 million per year deals that are going to role players. Like, for example, Golden State's there. Andrew Wiggins is making $26 million a year right now. You are not going to find a lot of Andrew Wiggins type players making current Andrew Wiggins money over the long term, because the league is squeezing those guys into those mid-level exception, $10 to $15 million type deals. And so there just won't be ways to trade for the Jimmy Butlers of the world, the Zach LaVines of the world, the Brandon Ingrams of the world even. And he's at what, like 35 or 36. So there is a decent gap between there. But it just becomes so much harder in this new environment to even make a legal trade, let alone make a trade that actually makes sense for both sides. So, like, for example, Golden State, I think you'd have to trade 4 guys, probably minimum, to get to the number of Jimmy Butler, unless you're like trading Steph Curry, which clearly they're not going to trade Steph Curry for Jimmy Butler. That's the new world that we're living in, and that's the predicament that teams like Miami, New Orleans, Chicago, the sellers of the league, are going to have to deal with moving forward.
Yeah, and to your point before, like in the past, you'd be like, all right, well, we can't get to 52, but we can get to 40, and then you get a 25% window where you can take above that. Now, a lot of teams, A, can't, and B, even if they can, they don't want to hard cap themselves, so there's going to be less willingness to do that. It is definitely tougher.
All right, and a name that I know a lot of people really want to talk about. We saw
Herb Jones.
I saw someone come in there and say, did I miss the Herb Jones conversation?
I was Hedfa.
No, you did not, Hedfa. You did not miss it. We are getting ready to get started with that. BD Riz says, Herb Jones clickbait, say less. All right, it's not clickbait. because they are a bad basketball team and they might have to do some things. It might be some real movement there in New Orleans. We talked about Brandon Ingram along with the Jimmy Butler part of it. Let's get to Herb Jones on the other side right here on the Tuesday, the PHLY Sixers podcast presented by Bet365. And I got to tell you about some food. Oftentimes we get out of here late at night, and as Derek and Kyle can attest to, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty hungry right now. I need some food. And it's tough when you go home late at night and you want to eat unhealthy and eat some bad food at midnight, 12:30 at night, and then go to sleep. Well, Factor Meal Kits, one of our sponsors here on the show, they make that pretty easy because maybe I want to make some food a little bit earlier before I come in. We don't have to get our pregame started until 6:30. Factor Meal Kits, they make it stress-free with their delicious, ready-to-eat meals overall. I can make it, get it done, pack it up, bring it into the office. We have a kitchen here. I can put it in the microwave, and I'm pretty good. You can choose weekly menus of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie, if that is your preference. Also, discover more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks, and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. What are you waiting for? You should not wait any longer. This is very easy for you. It works for us. It can work for you. No fuss, no mess meals. Factor meals eliminate the hassle of prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Simply heat and savor the good stuff when you sit down to enjoy that great meal. Late nights for us, late nights for you. You don't want to put a lot of work into it after a hard day's work. Check in with Factor Meal Kits. Head to factormeals.com/Sixers50. And again, use code Sixers50 to get 50% off. That's code Sixers50 at factormeals.com/Sixers50 to get 50% off.
We also want to tell you about C-Jam Construction. C-Jam Construction is a family-owned home remodeler specializing in decks, bathroom, and flooring. Their goal is to help their clients alleviate the challenges and frustrations that come with home remodeling. They are having a giveaway benefiting the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, which is running through December 20th with an online raffle for a chance to win a Yeti cooler and a Kelly Green Saquon Barkley jersey. All proceeds from the raffle will go towards their Chop Online Toy Drive. Raffle tickets are $10 a piece, and there is no limit to the amount a person can donate in one shot. The winner will be announced on December 21st. People can enter by going to cjamconstruction.com/toy drive. PHLY listeners receive 15% off when you call in at 856-329-2933 about your next home project. See their full selection and learn more about the products and warranties on their website, cjamconstruction.com.
Welcome back to the PHLY Sixers podcast presented by Bet365. Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck, Devon Givens. Bree is here. Check in here with us on a Tuesday, another non-game day as the NBA Cup schedule gets underway tomorrow on Wednesday around the association as they try to finalize things for their trip to Las Vegas in the NBA Cup, that midseason tournament that's happening around the league. Sixers not a part of it because they had a 2-2 record. I think they had 2-2 record.
I believe so.
Yeah,
they beat Brooklyn and they beat Charlotte.
Yep. So they're out. Other teams are in. And as we discussed that, New Orleans, they're not a team that's in. We look at the Sixers record at 7 wins. How about New Orleans? 5-20, Kyle, on the season. They've had some injuries, of course.
Injuries.
With Zion,
I saw
Trey Murphy to start the season. CJ McCollum was out for a time. Herb Jones.
Their top minutes played guys in terms of minutes per game. CJ McCollum's played 12 games. Trey Murphy, 12. Brandon Ingram, 18, but he's now out indefinitely. DeJounte, 8. Herb Jones, 7. Zion, 6. So when you say some injury problems, they've had a lot more than some.
Some. And they're bad. They're 5-20. So as we bring up Brandon Ingram, the one that Sixer fans have talked about a lot, Kyle, in the offseason, well, I know me personally, I would say, folks, there's no way you're getting Herb Jones. They're going to re-sign Trey Murphy. They're going to trade Brandon Ingram in the offseason this past summer. They did not do that. They're going to have those two guys as your future wings, along with trading for DeJounte Murray. Zion Williamson is there. They'll figure out the center position. This is their wing future. Well, their future right now doesn't look too bright at 5-20. Zion is out, as Derek mentioned. Brandon Ingram is now out indefinitely. They have a slew of injuries. That team is awful, and they may look to move in a different direction with this group. So maybe he might be available now.
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to shout out Shamit Dua over at the In the Know podcast. On there, they cover the Pelicans. On their show this week, they made a thumbnail graphic that said "Season from Hell," and they listed the tiers from Dante's Inferno. So it goes from limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, and it goes all the way down. And underneath treachery is the New Orleans Pelicans logo. That's the level of hell they've been in to start this year. So yes, to add on to your point, it has been a miserable start for the Pelicans. And I think the problem that they are running into that they really have to think about, not just heading into this year's deadline, but moving forward is, what is the ultimate ceiling of this group and what are you willing to go through and frankly pay to keep this group together, right? So Brandon Ingram's kind of been the face of that. But if you're not willing to make aggressive trades with the core guys who we'd look at as Zion, Ingram, and I guess they just went and got DeJounte Murray, so too early on him yet, but he's making a good amount of money moving forward. So if those guys are not getting moved and you're stuck in this limbo where your best player in Zion is always kind of hurt, and even when he's healthy, you can only hit a certain ceiling in the West, what are you doing? And, should you keep a lot of these guys under contract rather than tearing it down and trying to be more aggressive about collecting draft assets, drafting young guys? And so Herb Jones fits in a weird in-between, right, where he could be part of a current high-level team. He could be part of the next high-level team. But if you're going to go through a downturn, if you're not willing to pay into the second apron and things, which they shouldn't for this team, should you look into moving him? And for the Sixers, you look at him and say, that's the type of guy that is valuable on any type of contender, right? A big athletic wing who came in from day one, lockdown defender, switchable guy, is bigger than, frankly, a lot of the guys they're playing on the wing, right? He's like a true 6'8" compared to the Calebs and the Kellys who are more in that 2-3 mold. He's in the 3-4 and could play a true 4 next to Paul George and whoever you want to put at the 2, hopefully Jared McCain. And while there are questions about the shot, and we can get into what the actual value would be for him on the market, whether you could pay it, he's a very good player that if they make him available, and there still has been no indication that they're actively shopping him, it's more teams are following up on him.
Sure.
I would imagine that the Sixers are going to be aggressive, looking to see what is it going to take to get a Herb Jones into Philly. Because it's not just about this year. That's a guy who at 26, and he just turned 26 in October. So if you trade for him on his current contract, you can get him at 26, 27, 28, like absolute prime physical years, and he can help bridge you into whatever the next era looks like. Yes.
Yeah, not at a big number either.
No, I think there's a whole lot of factors that are contributing here that if you want him, you are going to have to overpay for him. And we can debate what exactly an overpay is.
Derek and I did debate
We did debate it a little bit.
Before the show.
We had a little bit of a discussion going on in our Die Hard Discord as well earlier.
I saw that.
So, no, you didn't. Shut up.
You don't see anything in the Discord, you liar. That's like LeBron reading all those books.
Devon's on page 1 of Discord.
Page 1 of the Discord Dimmons over here.
But I think there's, to Kyle's point, I think the market for him would be exceptionally wide. And we're talking about a wide market where pretty much any contender would be interested in. You almost by default end up overpaying. But when you now factor in how the league values wings, especially big wings with the kind of defensive versatility that Herb Jones has, who can absolutely defend 2, 3, 4, even 5 at a pinch. He can alter a shot every now and then. I think pretty much everyone in the league. Then you add in the fact that he's 26. He's on a very team-friendly contract that has 2 more years left after this one. We just got done talking about how some of these big contract wings from maybe that were given out before the current collective bargaining agreement, it's tough to move those. Well, now you've got a guy who's below market and in a double apron era, having someone who is underpaid during his prime years at the toughest position to get with the most scarcity. That guy is going to get overpaid. Like we're talking about a guy who finished 5th in Defensive Player of the Year with that kind of versatility and shot well last year. And we'll get into that in a second. He is going to be overpaid. So the question
While
is,
you're on the subject of the contract, by the way, just the details for everyone at home. He's making almost exactly 13 this year, a little under 14 next year, and then a little under 15 in the final year of his deal in 26, 27.
So I guess what I would say is there's no way you're getting him for less than 2 first-round picks. It's just not going to happen. There's too many teams that are going to be interested, too many contenders that are going to be interested, especially, like I said, with that low contract and with the financial crunch of the current collective bargaining agreement. 2 firsts is absolutely, I think, the baseline. Now, would you go 3? I don't know. And which I'm sure Devon saw. I said in Discord, 2 I would do, 3 I would have to think about. Because there is a tiny bit of a question on the shot. I will say, he has taken 633 attempts in the NBA from 3-point range. Almost half of them came last year. So I think when you're looking at his results, I think last year is the year that you weight most heavily. The number, he's shooting 29% this year. I wouldn't put a ton of stock in that, mostly because it's only on 24 attempts. He's barely played this year. We mentioned their injury struggles before then. So if you believe in that shot getting back to, maybe not, what was he last year? 42%?
40, almost 42, 41.8.
If you believe on him being a high 30s kind of shooter, I think it's possible somebody will give up certainly 2, possibly 3. Would I be 100% okay with that? No. But in order to be worth that, he would have to get back to that shooting. You have to buy into him as a shooter. But I think this is a market that somebody is going to overpay for him.
Yeah, my guess is long-term, he probably settles more into what we are talking about with like Caleb Martin's numbers, or not this year's numbers where he can't hit the broadside of a barn. It's more 35, 36% where you're right around average. And
44% against Boston Celtics in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if you get that, then certainly I would sign up today for trading for Herb Jones. I think my concern with him and why I think his market will be tough to figure out is that I think all the defensive stuff that Derek brings up is true, right? He is one of the most matchup-proof defenders you could possibly have in the league based on his size, his lateral quickness, like the ability to, you can play small ball center with him and that adds some versatility to it. Like I believe in him highly as a defensive player. And then I look at the other end and it's like, well, he can't really create shots for himself. He can't really create shots for others. And we're banking on 1 year, admittedly a higher volume year of shooting as evidence. And Derek will bring up the free throw shooting, which trended upward. And that I think is fair.
Kyle and I debating on. If you're wondering why Kyle's predicting my argument, it's because we had it about half an hour ago.
You're basically just betting on 1 year of shooting overruling not just what we've seen at the NBA level, but at the amateur level.
No, he couldn't shoot at Alabama at all.
He did not shoot there. And that's not to say he can't shoot forever. And it's been good to see the volume go up is an important thing. The other thing I would also say in his favor, if we're talking about shot volume and where the shots are coming from, Willie Green has generally not been a guy who's a zealot about you have to be a 3-point guy, right? He's said, or at least allowed his guys to be mid-range specialists or guys who will step in and take a mid-range jumper. And there's a time and place for that, but I think a different coach might be able to go to him and say, you're not taking those shots. Just bomb away from 3. Do the Joe Mazzulla approach and say, we don't care how many you miss, just get them up. And maybe that helps in the long term. But I wouldn't pay more than 2 real first-round picks for him. I think that's probably the ceiling for me on where I'm willing to go. You might be able to find an executive who says he's worth 3, and that's where it becomes an actual conversation. But I think the cost control, the defense, that's worth 2 to me. I'm just not willing to gamble the majority or more than half of the picks you have available to trade for one guy. I just don't believe in him that much.
Is that the same thing? The majority, more than half?
No, it's more than half. I'm saying I'm not willing to go more than half of what you have left to trade for him. Maybe half.
And that third for a team that says, all right, I'll do it. It's just they feel real good about where they are for a contender right now to win immediately and that he's going to help later on. And they probably feel like down the line that they can do whatever they need to do to address whatever issues that may still be there on their roster because of the cost control that you talk about, where he's only making $13 million a year, that they can go and find somebody else with shooting. So if you look at the Sixers right now, and let's say you insert him into the lineup because you're not giving up George, Maxey, or Embiid, and of course, this is a big four, so you're not giving up McCain either. And you're not worried about, you're worried about his shooting because we'll watch the games and you'll see 5 missed threes from Herb Jones in a game where he had some real big shots there, and he missed them in a time where they really couldn't afford for that to happen. But for most nights, with those 4 out there and the shot making that they have compared to his profile, you can get away with it because he's also going to make up for it with his 3 steals that come in a big spot or his 4 steals that come in a big spot, transition opportunities that he does create to get out there in the open floor because of how elite his defense is. So somebody will be willing to move that third pick potentially because of the fact that, hey, we're trying to win right now. And if this is a guy that we can't get elsewhere at a decent price like this anyway, then yeah, they'll be willing to do that. We've seen it done before, and somebody will do it again.
Here's one thing I want to note with Herb Jones that I think gets skipped over because he's big and because people are just like focus on the defensive stuff. He's not a good rebounder, and the team has not rebounded well with him on the floor across the board, right? And I'm not saying this year. Last year, when we have more of a full sample of, this is what, 2,300 minutes or whatever it was, they were considerably worse on the offensive glass. Now they're a little bit better on the defensive end rebounding. So however you want to prioritize that, I think the Sixers have had more issues protecting their own glass, right? Sure. And you would think, all right, if we can defend better, it was the logic of the offseason, right? With Kelly and Caleb and Paul next to Joel, if you defend better, he can rebound easier and whatnot. But there are mixed results there for him. How much of that is on who he's playing with, I don't know. But I don't think you would get as much rebounding from him as you would think. And I don't know that the impact on team rebounding from his defensive upgrade helps as much as you think either, at least based on what we've seen over the 4 years of his career.
All right. Well, what would it take the Sixers to what do they have? Because, of course, we're in our chat. We can't go with the one that I saw that said a first plus Kyle Lowry, Eric Gordon, and, that's not happening.
No.
And so, what would it take for the Sixers for what they have available to them, what they have on their roster? Hang on to it. We'll get to that on the other side because we do want to talk about some other names in the Eastern Conference around the NBA that could be available, could be on the block in general that the Sixers might have interest in, or once again, could just change how things are in the Eastern Conference. We'll do that when we get back right here on the PHLY Sixers podcast presented by Bet365.
All right, guys, we want to tell you about Rite Aid, specifically the pneumonia vaccine. Help protect yourself from pneumonia. Adults age 50 and older are now eligible for the vaccine. It was previously ages 65 and older, but the CDC lowered the age recommendation to 50 plus. Millions of people get pneumonia every year. It's a respiratory illness, and fall and winter are a time when germs that cause respiratory disease typically spread more in the community. So now is the time to get vaccinated and help yourself stay healthy. Some people who get pneumonia only have mild symptoms, but others experience serious complications. The vaccine is one of the best ways to keep yourself healthy, and it's usually at no cost with insurance. Getting vaccinated is easy. Just walk into your local Rite Aid or schedule online at riteaid.com. If you're unsure of what vaccines you may need, just ask your pharmacist for a personal recommendation. Stop by your local Rite Aid today.
Hey, guys, I have to tell you about a wonderful friend of ours who, frankly, I think my dog has liked as much as me when it shows up. That's HelloFresh. That's right. My bulldog thinks when a big box of fresh ingredients and food shows up at the door that it's only for him. He smells those delicious things that HelloFresh is sending, and he says, I've had enough of my food. I want your food. Guys, I love HelloFresh, and I've told you about it on this show because it checks a lot of boxes for me, right? We work weird hours. We're dragged all over the place. We have to climb 7 sets of stairs to get up to our office right now. We're working nights. We're working weekends. I don't want to have to overthink when it comes to ingredient shopping, when it comes to cooking. And here's the great thing. HelloFresh simplifies all of it. All the ingredients get individually packed. You get a recipe sheet. You get instructions. And they tell you and show you this is exactly what you, the dummy who can't cook, like me, gets to do to prepare a nice home-cooked meal. And we had, listen, between Devon, Derek, and I believe we all got HelloFresh boxes at some point in recent weeks and months. And the variety is great. The one night you're eating Middle Eastern food. The next night you're having some true Italian food, some sausage ragu with pasta. And it's all over the map. You can customize exactly the types of food you want, the difficulty level of the recipes. It's customizable for exactly what you want. And that's what I love so much about it. So I want you guys to go and get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free Sixers, FREE Sixers, applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only, varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/free Sixers. America's #1 meal kit. Thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring the show.
Welcome back to the PHLY Sixers podcast presented by Bet365, our good friends from Bet365. And with that, Elite Run is the one who said it first. KJ Martin, Eric Gordon, and Kyle Lowry, Derek. That was the proposal from Elite Run. Also, Taj W says, are you guys worried about a shot? We talked about that a little bit there right before the break. So, yeah, we're a little bit worried about it, but his defensive profile overall and what he does out there can change a lot of your thoughts on that.
So just real quick about the shot, in part because it was mentioned there, in part because Kyle teased my argument in favor of it earlier. Besides the fact that almost half of his three-point attempts came last year when he shot 47%, he's shooting 37% from three for his NBA career. But it's really the trajectory. When he got to Alabama, he was shooting like 50% from the line. Then he got up to the low 60s, low 70s, and since being in the NBA, he's been in the low 80s. Combine that with the fact that he shot the three ball so well last year. I'm not going to say, like I said, I'm not going to say he's a 42% three-point shooter, but the 36 to 38% range, I think that is a reasonable projection for him to make over the next 3 years, and that will be enough to have him on the floor and have that defense really shine. In terms of the salary, now again, since the Sixers are over the first apron, they have to send out more than they receive. So he is making, like 12.9? So basically, we'll just call it 13. You could have like Kelly Oubre, who's at 8, KJ Martin at 7.7. So you still need to come up with another $5+ million. Andre Drummond would work, but you kind of want, backup center. Maybe something like I'm not. It might end up being something like maybe Kelly and KJ, both of them. That'll get you over there, right there. It could be Eric Gordon's $3 million might help. Maybe Eric Gordon and Andre Drummond, but you just have to match that salary and then give them whatever draft picks they would want. So I think that's really what it is, and it is again. If I'm going to be talked into that first round pick, a big part of that is whether or not I think the Sixers actually have a chance to compete, and how the confidence I have with Joel Embiid, because I look at Jones and I think, man, he is almost a perfect fit for this team if you're putting him alongside Joel Embiid, alongside Paul George in that front court to really build the kind of dynamic defense that you need to cover up for a small backcourt. But none of that really matters if Joel Embiid can't play in the playoffs. So how much I'm willing to give up is in part, first, you got to beat the market. Second, you got to tell me that the Sixers are the right team to beat the market. A lot of that depends on Joel Embiid and your confidence level in him.
So a few things. One, we have someone in the chat, 215 J Philly, who said, y'all lying. Y'all ain't getting no damn food box. I'm going to prove to you that's my dog with a HelloFresh box. What did I say? Louis the Bulldog loves his HelloFresh. There are no lies told on this show, and I do not like those accusations being made about my wholesome personal experiences that I'm talking about with our partners on this show. So thank you again to HelloFresh for sending us that food.
Also, thank you for giving us an excuse to put Louis up there.
Exactly. Yeah. The real star of PHLY, along with Derek's cats and super producer Bree behind the screen over there. So the other thing I wanted to focus on that Derek said. So the defensive stuff and the real argument for Herb Jones is that this team has already started to show you, even without a clean bill of health, that defense is their calling card, right? I believe they're already at like 12th or so in defensive efficiency for the league. You can double check me on that, Derek, as I'm going through this. But with very limited Joel Embiid, with limited Paul George.
12th exactly.
Look at that.
Just dunking on everyone. See, dunking with Louis.
No lies on this damn show. I tell the truth around here, damn it. So 12th with very limited time from your two, I would say, more defensively focused stars and trying to integrate Maxey and McCain in the backcourt. If you add Herb Jones and his switch ability, his ability to be a small ball five and offer you like real size there and do all the things that he could do, you could, with even a checkered bill of health for the main stars, get into that top 10, top 8, maybe even the top 5, and have a defensive ceiling that would be significant, right? So I agree with Derek. The hard part about trying to put together a trade, whether it's for Herb Jones or anybody else, is this group has to get to mid-January, early February, and actually keep stringing wins together, actually keep guys on the floor and be healthy enough for Daryl Morey and the front office to justify, hey, we're going to give up multiple real picks, real assets that we might need later in order to be aggressive now and lock in a guy that can help us now and into the future.
And is it going to be too late? Because somebody might swoop in there early and just say, you know what, because of the market, because of what you guys talked about, that they want to jump in there and they want to get theirs beforehand. And that could be something that it might be too late. And that's where we look at where they are right now with their 7-15 schedule. I mean, record through the 22 games. And not only is it hurting you in the standings, but it's also hurting you in the trade conversation because of what you may have been able to do a little bit earlier, but already knowing your position in the Eastern Conference of being a top 3, top 5 seed. And now you're on the back end. You're trying to wait to see if you turn things around. And as a result, you missed out on a key player like that might have been the one for you.
I mean, to be clear, though, I would not make a trade until we're real close to the deadline. And
you know teams will in December and January and just say, you know what, we're going to get ahead of it.
They might, although I do think the point Kyle brought up about hard capping if you take back more. But with this one, it's not as much of a concern because his salary is so easy to match.
Yeah.
But I do think trade activity might be a little less before February than it has been years past. Regardless, I think your point is right. There's a chance you could miss out like you did with Siakam last year, like you did with OG last year. But I don't think the Sixers would be such a massive risk to try to jump the trade market when you have so little knowledge. Because it's one thing, I think a lot of people look at the trade deadline and think, it's a midway point of the season. No, it's really like the 2/3 mark of the season. We're only a quarter of the way through. There's a lot of season left. You've got to see what the Sixers' health is going to be like, quite frankly, and whether or not they have a chance to get a real legitimate decent seed and qualify for the playoffs. I will say, though, like if you're talking about 1 or 2 first-round picks, I would pull the trigger on that now because I think in a year, if things aren't working out, you can recoup those picks for Herb Jones. He's not going to lose value over the next 12 months. So if things don't work out with Joel Embiid and his knee and his health, I think you can pivot from that. It's when you start getting into 3 or even more first-round picks, then you might struggle to recoup that. And then something like that, if it's going to take it, then you wait until the trade deadline.
And that's kind of why I think I'm at 2 and no more because I am comfortable making that trade now. I'm comfortable making that trade in mid-January for similar reasons as we brought him up prior to the show. Denny Avdia, that's basically what they paid, right? It was Malcolm Brogdon and whatever the Wizards valued him for and 2 first-round picks. Like that to me, cost-controlled player, 2-way guy potentially who can help you now and help you later. I think that's a fair price for a Herb Jones type player. He's not a shot creator. He's not someone that I have a ton of confidence in as a shooter, but the defensive upside and the case that you can make that he's building toward being a better shooter, I think that's worth 2. Ramping up toward being a trustworthy shooter. Plus you factor in, hopefully he's having more shots created for him. It's a better environment in general than, the Pelicans injury ward this season. Give me Herb Jones for 2 first-round picks and the contracts to match. I will take that. But anything over that, I'm setting a hard line on that.
Before we get to Cam Johnson and some other names, Dorian Finney-Smith as well with the Brooklyn Nets, Bree, let's show 215J Philly what I got from HelloFresh.
Hey!
No dog in the background, just the floor and the cabinets.
See, that one, that looks like that could be anybody's home with a box. That's like HelloFresh was on the phone, like, quick, get the Devon picture over.
No dog in the background, but that's my box. So 215J Philly. Go get your HelloFresh.
And by the way, Louis is a prominent part of Kyle's Instagram. So if you don't believe him that that's his dog, you can just go check.
Yes, 100%.
There is a lot of Louis content on the internet 100%. And on my phone. So I have Louis pictures for every time and occasion. I can promise you that.
215J Philly says, AI Devon, LOL. Fair enough.
I don't think I took a picture.
Yeah, Kyle Wright said I went to Getty Images and got some HelloFresh photos.
The Getty Images stock photo of HelloFresh.
Yes, I took the Getty image off the, off there so you can't
Listen,
see.
I saved the recipes that I got.
That's actually I'm checking. I'm pretty sure I saved
the sheets, but I couldn't remember who I sent it to. I think it was my daughter where I sent the sheets that came inside the box.
I saved those sheets because I actually I reverse engineered I was like, I don't have another box right now, but
Right.
I can try to make this sausage ragu
Yeah.
and combine that with another thing I was making. So HelloFresh really helping out around the house even after you've ordered the
I
boxes.
still have the pretzel bites because that's the only thing we didn't
Oh,
make.
we already ate those.
I
Those
still
went
have the-
quickly in my
I still have
household.
the pretzel bites still there that you can put in the oven. So yeah, that's where I am. So
There you go.
215. Go get your HelloFresh. It's pretty easy. It's
There,
pretty
that is a
Hey!
picture of one of my recipes
Look at
just for
that.
further proof.
at that.
Perfect.
I don't think I have the whole box, but
But that's also could be a stock photo.
Look at that. Oh, Derek just cares about food presentation. He's like, hey, look at my
I'm doing the
nicely-
same thing Kyle did. What are you talking about?
All right, let's get to Cam Johnson of the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets right now at 10-14 on the campaign. Cam Johnson, of course, one of their better players. He had like 7 threes, 9 threes against the Sixers, whatever it was.
He was cooking in that
on
game,
fire
man.
that night. He had 30 plus in that game. Cam Johnson averaging 18 points, close to 19 on the season. He is shooting 39%, 43% on just a little over 7 attempts
Yeah, he's
a
shooting the heck out of the
game.
ball.
He shoots the ball really well, as we know, and he is on a bad team right now. His contract, he signed a 4-year deal, I believe it was, when he was still with the with the Brooklyn Nets after the trade. He is making right now 22.5 this season, and has about 3 years left on his
2
deal.
years.
2 years left
2
on
years
his deal
after this one.
after this one. So 6'8" wing who can knock shots down at a pretty decent clip overall. Just like we talk about with Herb Jones, he's not the greatest defender. He can create his own shot. His availability sometimes is in question of how many games he might miss. But the one thing that guy can do is shoot the basketball, and that can help any contending team.
Yeah, so he is basically the inverse of the Herb
Yes.
Jones case, right? Where I absolutely believe he can shoot. He wants to shoot at high volumes, and that is a skill that he had coming into the league that has held up across, what is he in year 1, 2, 3, 4, like six? Yes.
Six.
6 years in the league. He's been a fairly consistent, high volume, fairly high efficiency shooter. It's all the other stuff that I'm not as much a believer in. There's not as much shot creation as you would want for a guy who's an offensive guy. I think defensively is, you called him a wing, Devon. I think he's more of a true forward, right? Like he's almost a stretch 4 type guy, even though those don't really exist as much anymore. And I don't think he helps with the rebounding all that much either. I would say in my head, and I don't want to use, I think he has a reputation of being a bit soft, right? Like, and I don't think that's necessarily a guy who,
Or as Devon said, not the greatest defender.
I think that's kind of the book on him. That's what people think about him. And I think
That is absolutely
while he has had moments in the playoffs, there are also times when you're just going right through him, or you need him to play through sort of like the Caleb Martin thing, right? You need him to play through some stuff that's like bumps, bruises, and he's had a bit of a reputation for maybe not pushing himself that hard during those moments.
Yes.
Also notably, compared to Herb Jones, he's making
Way
about
more.
$10 million more dollars. And if you're trying to match money from the Sixers perspective, then you get into, you got to use like 2, maybe even 3 significant contracts on the team for guys that are rotation level players. It's not like you can't cobble this together with one guy plus some dead weight at the end of the books.
No, and I'm just going to repeat this over and over and over again. Because the Sixers are over the first apron, they have to send out more salary than they take back. So if he's at like 22 to 23, you might have to include Kelly and KJ and Caleb. Now, look, I know everyone's going to look at Caleb and be like, well, he can't shoot, he
cares?
can't
Yeah.
play. But theoretically, they signed him to a 4-year deal because they believe he will play, because they believe in his defense. So you are giving up a guy that they believe, once he gets his ailments right, will be a rotation player and a reliable playoff performer. You're going to have to give that up to get Cam Johnson. That is a very not insignificant part of this equation. And you're also buying high on him. Like, this is in part because they have nobody else around him, but he's averaging 18 per game,
Yeah.
shooting the absolute heck out of the ball, 43% from 3-point range. He is, or no, that was somebody else's stats. It doesn't. Yeah. 43% from 3-point range on 7.6 attempts per game. I'm throwing myself for a loop here, but it is, you are buying high on him.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to have to pay more than you would want. and it's going to be real tough to match salary. And he's not the greatest defender in the world. So it is, I honestly, just as a player, I have more interest in Herb Jones. I think he's probably
100% agree with you on that
going to cost more in terms of draft assets to get. But if we're talking like, I don't even want to speculate because I don't know how much this career year from Cam Johnson is going to factor into the trade market. But I certainly have more interest in Jones.
Yeah, I think because the league is predicated so much on shooting now, a lot of people will get drawn to, and I've been a victim of this too, right? And you look at what Joel Embiid teams need, it's like, well, that guy can shoot at high volume. I'll take him, right? But you look at a team, for example, like Dallas last year, that was willing to say, hey, PJ Washington has a checkered history as a pure three-point shooter, but he can do other stuff, right? Or we're going to take a chance on a Derrick Jones Jr., who has not shot well most of his career, but we believe in the defensive stuff. We believe playing off Luka, you can weaponize his athleticism, and both of those moves paid dividends for them, prioritizing guys who can do other stuff, who are, matchup proof on the defensive end to some degree. There's a lot of value in that. And so I would rather, even though I was poo-pooing what Derek was saying about Herb Jones's trade value and what I'd give up for him, I would rather pay the same price for a guy who's having a down year shooting, who I believe strongly in as a defender, than pay top of market value for a guy shooting really well, who I don't believe in as a defender basically at all.
Yeah. And if you give up Kelly and Caleb and KJ and all of us, and for a bad defender, I'm going to be a little harsher than Devon, a bad defender in Cam Johnson, all of a sudden
we don't have the family-based connection to playing with them, right? So we
honestly,
can be
it was just the way you phrased it that was funny, and Aaron in the chat was pointing it out as well. But for a bad defender in Cam Johnson, all of a sudden you are asking 34 going on 35-year-old Paul George to be like a stopper in the playoffs.
Yes.
And that would be a very tough spot to put him in. That would be a spot where I wouldn't trust him to be able to do on a night-to-night basis. It is, and Kyle was right, they're 12th defensively, and now you got the big man back. They can go up from there. I would much rather over-index on defense and defensive versatility than a little bit of shot creation and even a little bit of three-point shooting that certainly, and I was bullish on Herb Jones' shot. Cam Johnson's a better shooter. It's not even close, but I would rather veer towards the defensive side of the floor.
All right, let's go to the other teammate of his with Dorian Finney-Smith, also a conversation piece for the offseason. For us, his name also back in there as well. So Dorian Finney-Smith, $14.9 million this year, 31 years of age. You already know who he is. It's just a matter of how much would it cost? Would you want him at this age, and would he make a difference?
Yeah. Plot this one, I got confused before I was looking at his three-point shooting, which is also 43%.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah, look, much easier contract to match. Much less in terms of...
He's making about like 14?
Yeah.
14.9.
Yeah. Which we know off the top of our head because we spent like all summer talking about it. Easier contract to match. You expect that he's not going to cost... He might not even get a first-round pick. You might be able to get him for seconds in matching salary. Maybe at worst, like a fake first-round pick. Yeah. So you expect him to cheaper in terms of the contracts you have to send back, cheaper in terms of the picks it's going to take to acquire. I would have much more interest, even though he's not as good of a player, in Dorian Finney-Smith than I would in Cam Johnson.
So what would that cost you, KJ, and that fake first?
Yeah, and some other matching salary.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I look at him as that's the... You're not really committing anything trade, right?
That's the Buddy Hield 2025.
It's the George Hill, Buddy Hield. It's that type of trade. And while there's some merit to trades like that, I think I'm at the point where if they're making relatively sizable deadline moves, I want it to be with at least some eye toward the future and with at least some eye toward this is a guy who you can begin building chemistry and long-term. Well, that's what I mean. Like Herb Jones, you trade for him. That is about this year, right? Like that helps you this year, but you have him for multiple years. And that's one of the great shames of, I was happy with the summer. I'm happy with the guys I brought in around Joel Embiid. But when his message is continuity and how much that matters, when you're constantly doing that in the off season, and then those guys or you're bringing someone in at the deadline and then they leave, you just keep turning back the clock on this is the most realized version of this team. So my goal would be keep some of the guys at the deadline that you hope can be long-term guys. I think, frankly, as bad as he's been, Caleb would be a priority for me to keep for that reason, because he's on that longer-term deal, because you believe when he's not hurt that he'll play better than he has now, and get guys like Herb Jones that are going to be able to be part of that longer, at least midterm core instead of Reynolds. Like I think bleeding picks and bleeding assets away on Reynolds every year is a way to end up in this no man's land that everyone was afraid of, that unfortunately they have arrived at all the same.
Go to another name. Talked about him a lot, a little bit older, Kyle Kuzma in this case. He's Kyle Kuzma. Again,
the money is, you get into the Cam Johnson range. And I've seen, so 215 brought up in the chat like a John Collins. We discussed him in the summer. All these guys are different players, but in terms of the trade structure, they bring the same problems. I think Collins is actually making 20, let's say like 26. I'm making up that number off the top of my head, and I can double check that. But I have looked at a lot of these guys' salaries since
26.5.
Look at that. Almost right on the money again. So John Collins is a guy who I think if you put him on a better team, and he actually has played reasonably well when I've watched Utah this year.
He had a really good stretch too about 2 weeks ago.
And I think
2 weeks.
That's a guy who kind of splits the difference on a lot of the skills we're talking about. Like can be a weak side rim protector, can help you rebounding the ball, can shoot, although he's a streaky guy there. And he's really only locked in for this year and next. He's got a player option I assume he's picking up for next year. It's just so difficult to get to that salary number that I don't think a trade is feasible unless you want to trade like 4 or 5 guys. And that just, then you're cobbling together a rotation on the fly in February and March, and that's not a path to success.
Bring up Collins and all of these guys. You just talked me into Herb Jones, baby. Overpay. Let's do it. No, and Kuzma, like it's just so much harder to get to 23.5 for Kuzma, 26.5 for Collins. It is very, very tough to do that.
Any other names we missed? Any significant names that we missed?
Not recently.
I don't think so.
I mean, well, as obviously we get deeper into trade season, I always love that it's like December 15th is this important date, and then nothing happens for like another month and a half. Yeah. It's always... It's one of those things that I think we love on this side, or that other insider
December 15th,
love.
We'll be talking about it. That is, you can pencil in our show.
But it always ends up like all the action happens way later. But yeah, I would expect we're going to hear some more names emerge in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, so not a lot of big names. December 30th, 2023 was the OG Anunoby deal with RJ Barrett. So Derek, you mentioned that one was a little bit earlier. And just looking at the Pascal Siakam.
It was January, right?
I think that was after, right? Yeah, that was after. So,
but it was a couple weeks before the deadline.
January 17th.
Yeah,
January 17th. So things do happen in December, maybe a little bit later, and certainly in January, where you have to monitor where Herb Jones's name is being thrown out there, as well as some of these other players as well, and what it might mean for the Sixers and their market. Our show today was presented by our good friends from Bet365. As always, Bet365. Download the Bet365 app. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let's get to our world-famous roll call on a Tuesday here on the PHLY Sixers podcast.
Hello and goodbye, everyone who's hanging with us today. Thank you to 215 J Philly, who we sent a lot of Hello Fresh pictures.
Go get some grill.
And he says they're AI, but I promise you they are 100% real. Hello, and thank you also to Martian Lynch, to AA Ron, to X-Men, to Darkness.
Turn the lights down.
To my girl Winona, who's back today.
Winona's back.
Hope your meeting, at least that's what people said you were away for. Hope your meeting went well yesterday. Shout out to Eugene Ross. Shout out to Wawa Marvel. Shout out to Hedfa hanging out with us, the #1 Herb Jones fan in the chat.
Hedfa?
Randy Rubart is back with us today after a hiatus. Kyle Wright is here. Money Marr is here. Malk C10 is here.
What up, Malk?
I Gavini, Alden Network. Jess with the blue heart.
Hey, Jess.
Still wrong to say. It just does not feel right to say Jess with the blue
Ego,
heart.
Emi, Apologetics, Profit One, Bootzilla.
Boots.
Think I saw cannoli. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
It's all
If you
sound
haven't
there.
already, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, hit the thumbs up to say thank you to super producer Bree and help us in the algorithm. We'll be back tomorrow at 3. And K-Red, what up, K-Red?
What up?
We'll see you guys tomorrow at 3 p.m. after a Sixers practice. Let's go.
See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.